How's it, guys? Evening. Welcome on this nice warm Wednesday evening. It's a little bit warmer than yesterday. We're going to have a good night tonight. This talk is going to be a little bit different to the rest. It's not just tech stuff. Got a good friend of mine, Brendan Ross, that's joined in. I'm not even going to cut straight to the chase and bring him into the conversation. How's it, Brendan?
Good evening. Hi, everybody. Hi, Cristo.
How's it, man? And just again from my side, thank you for agreeing to do this. Put yourself out there. Make it sound worse than it is. But I mean, it came across. I've been watching a lot of streams, and obviously we've been having some good conversations with some technical guys. Had a great time, me and Marius, last night, just chatting about rubbish, nonsense, and just some good times and memories and old stuff and new stuff.
I watched a bit.
That's nice, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we've had some really technical sessions. I had Simon on. I had Adrian on. We even had MJ on with some RF stuff, and we've had some good questions and remarks from guys in the industry, and requests for topics which we've covered. But one of the themes that came across in a lot of the chats that we've had has been sort of the communication, the attitude, from as an engineer's perspective. Even last night, me and Marius, we had some questions come through. What do I need to do as a young guy in the industry? And then me and Adrian spoke, and Simon spoke, and with MJ, and just there's a lot of sort of awareness from us guys that have been in the industry for a while on what it takes to make it. I've been doing this. We worked out last night between me and Morris is 55 years of professional involvement in the industry. Between
you
two
don't
of
look
us.
a day over 60.
No, it's 28. I know. I'll own up to that one. 28 plus VAT.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure mine's something close to that. I haven't worked it out, but
yeah. I mean, we're the same age. I mean, you're tons older than me. I think it's 2 months. Yeah. So, but for me, it was just a good theme running through, and then I started chatting, about some of the guys that I know, and I wrote down a bunch of names. And yours happened to be at the top of my head because I've been watching some of your amazing YouTube videos. I've mentioned it a couple of times on the stream, and we've shared it with the people.
Thanks, man.
No, it's great. I mean, it's you've got a real a knack for the creative, and when you do something, you do it properly. And over the years. I'm complimenting you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just don't want to interrupt you, but I'll take them as
I'll blow your trumpet because you're a sax player, so I'll have to blow your trumpet for you.
Thanks, Cristo.
And then, I mean, we've come a long way as well. We've known each other for yonks, and it's been great watching you. And I often, from starting out from my young age, when I was in my teens, still doing monitors, having to deal with musicians and learning communication styles, everything from a bit of lip reading to, body language to quirks and things with different musicians, and it makes you a good monitor engineer when you can observe well, you can read people well, you get to know people quickly, in that context, in that perspective. I mean, I might not know what coffee you like, although I would probably, but
yeah.
But I know what you need in your environment. And when you've got a stage with 5, 6, 7 people on, every sort of bubble is different. Every flavor of every bubble is different. People are at different levels. I mean, we've got Blue Bamboo on the screen here tonight. That's been it's 10 years now that we've been running.
Is it that long?
Yeah. I think it was 2010 when you guys phoned me. Yeah. It's 10 years.
That's a scary thought.
So it's a nice reference for me to use. We'll talk about Blue Bamboo a bit just now. A few people aren't. Johan's going to throw the link in the chat. Yeah, you can go check out Blue Bamboo's page as well. Nice corporate, best corporate band in the country, in my opinion.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
But in that bubble, you've got yourself, you've got Denny Lalouette, Sidney Mawundla, Marlon Witboy, Nigel Morkel, Chanel Davis, just some really amazing talents. But from a technical perspective, if I had to paint that picture, the I wouldn't call it expectation. It's a wrong word because there's no right or wrong. Everybody within their bubble needs a certain support structure, if you can call it that, to be able to live out their creativity, to be able to settle themselves into what they have to deliver in that moment. And obviously the band clicks. The band's got communication, they got great vibe, but the way, for example, Denny approaches monitoring, the way you approach monitoring, the way Marlon approaches monitoring, the way Sydney approaches monitoring, if you just look at backgrounds, Sydney with jazz, Marlon still young, technically very, very, very savvy, just all around has an absolute ball on stage. Denny, very precise, very precision orientated, very focused, yourself all around, just completely in the moment of what's needed. And yet, if you look at the way we set up our consoles, the way we set up our monitoring, and the way we communicate with you and the way you communicate with us, there's pretty much 6 different languages being spoken, So the ability to learn that comes with time, and relationship. We spoke about that the other night. Just the relationship that we have to build with people in order to be able to create that a rapport, if you can call it that. And it's something that I obviously try and teach guys that are coming up, guys that we... Can you not hear me? Sorry? I can hear you.
No, I've got you. I can hear you, but I can hear you again. Yeah.
We might have some technical issues.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Don't worry.
I can't hear you anymore.
Oh dear. Just if you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up. I'm gonna keep chatting to the guys.
I've got you now.
Awesome. Technology is what technology is. I mean, we're all sitting at home, and everybody's on the streaming movies right now somewhere in the world. But teaching youngsters what it takes to be able to communicate properly, and I often say, especially when doing monitors, 95% of your job is PR. The 5% of the tech is actually easy when you get the PR right, which is the public relations and dealing and being able to communicate and put people like you at ease. So I've brought you on here from your perspective. You've traveled the world, you've played with some amazing people. I mean, you in your own right is an amazing musician, standalone. So you've experienced a broad variety of technical scenarios, engineers, stages, from full-on corporate to full-on festival to well-rehearsed to off-the-cuff, all the different vibes. And you've got a different approach. Not a different approach. You've got a certain approach in the way that you approach a gig from your perspective as a musician. Obviously, there's a preparation list. We spoke a lot about that as well from a sound perspective. But then you can prepare as much as you want, and then you arrive with us, and then we have to go with you on that journey to be able to deliver. So,
yes,
the first question I want to ask you is, how much does a good communication relationship, for lack of a better word, play a role in your state of mind when you step on a stage? And I'm talking specifically now towards technical people, so your sound guys, your staging guys, people like that.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the gig, because what I find is, as soon as I know that I'm in good hands, and like that we're on the same wavelength with, whether it's the monitor guy or whether it's the tech guys or whether it's the front of house guy, whoever. Sometimes we're not lucky enough to have all those extras. We've just got a front of house guy that's doing monitors as well. But as soon as I know that I'm in safe hands, and you can quite quickly pick that up. I'm obviously talking about not when I'm working with you guys. I'm talking about, it could be anybody on any given night. I'm talking about, festivals and corporates where we don't have the luxury of having you, and any kind of gig where every situation is different. And I know that as soon as I can sort of suss, okay, this guy's got ears, and he's sympathetic towards our needs and our situation, then I can start relaxing and focus on delivering. And sometimes, unfortunately, that's out of everybody's control. The gear that's been supplied at a festival may be substandard, and we left, to just have to kind of swim through the murky waters, not focusing on the fact that we can't maybe hear ourselves well, or that whatever's not working, we don't have enough lines coming back at us that we need to monitor, what we might need to monitor. So yeah, I hope I'm not getting off topic here, but it's very much, it makes a big difference to me, because if I can be relaxed, then I can focus on the music as opposed to the technical side of stuff,
Okay. So you mentioned gear a little bit there, and obviously you travel with your own saxophones, but obviously on our riders with Blue Bamboo, we've got, a XF6 or FX7 non-weighted Yamaha keyboard, Yamaha being your sponsor, your endorsement, sorry.
Endorsement, yeah.
And then you'd get to a place where there's a Montage or a XF8, which is a much better keyboard, in a non-educated mindset of someone that is supplying a festival, and they look at your rider and they go, well, I've got one better than that, so he should be fine.
Yeah.
That's obviously happened to you. I mean, I don't even have to ask you. How does that play a role in your psyche?
Look, there've been times where I've had to work around that and live with whatever I've got, but it's very disheartening when you arrive knowing that you've stipulated it like clear as day in your tech rider, and you've put in red, not this, no that, only this, and you've made it as clear as you possibly can, and you've made the phone call the day before or on the day of the gig or leading up to the gig, and everybody assures you that it's all in order, and then you get there and it's like you say, maybe a better keyboard, but it's not what I need. It's not what's going to work for me, because like in the case of Blue Bamboo and a lot of other acts, I travel with a little memory stick, which is set up to work specifically with the keyboards that I've got on the rider. So if I get there and they give me a better keyboard, that's, in their minds, it might be a great idea. But for me, I can't do anything with my memory stick, and I've got to fumble through finding the right sounds that I need for the repertoire, where all that homework is done for me long before the time, and I can just get there, plug in my memory stick, and I know that if I hit these numbers, I've got shortcuts to what I need. So yeah, unfortunately, that struggle is real, but
and it's not so much the fact that you don't know how the keyboard works. It's a lot deeper than that. And if it's advice I can give younger guys and company owners out there, you need to take riders seriously from a perspective of, this is not necessarily a wish list or a nice to have. This is something that, like you say, you come there with your mind prepared, you've done your homework, and you could probably fluff your way around and use whatever they've got there, but it just adds that little thing on the shelf in your back of your head which shouldn't be there during the gig, because if you're on a device that you don't think about, am I hitting the right sound, or how's it going to go, or how to play it. Everything just works. So it's a comfort factor, but it's also it's a tool for you to be able to perform based on what you've been required to achieve. Because the one thing I want you to talk to about is a little bit from that technical perspective. I for example, over the years have realized with the weight that on someone like you, if you're an MD in a band, or if you're a performer booked for a corporate, even if you're doing a one-man band, if it's just you by yourself, and you've booked by a client, the client's paid you, you've arrived, all that, but there's still, a mindset that you've got in terms from a sales perspective. You still have to perform, you still have to pull it off, you're still reading the crowd.
Yeah.
You have to deliver above and beyond, even with some technical challenges sometimes. So your mindset is not necessarily, you're not always thinking, oh, this sounds great, or this guy's a really nice guy, or, your focus is purpose-driven.
On the performance.
On a performance,
Yeah.
So just talk a little bit about that in terms of a headspace.
Yeah, it comes back to the gear, and comes back to what you've prepared yourself mentally for. So if someone, if the keyboard is wrong, for example, like you say, we have to find ways to maneuver through that, regardless of what's thrown at us. And sometimes, like if I think back to, like, sometimes when we were traveling in Europe, and I remember a specific show in Italy. I was there with the Clegg band, and we got to this town, and they had this. I forget, at the time it was a Triton. It was a Korg Triton, I think we had on the rider. And we got to sound check in the afternoon, and this Italian guy with a thick accent, and he was going, "But why you don't like a Miazzi? I give you Miazzi's very good keyboard." And we had and this Triton was exactly what I was telling you now, except we used to run some tracks like loop elements and stuff from a little zip drive, little external drive that used to fit onto the back of this Triton that was on the rider. And so it really put our hands, it really cuffed our hands in the sense that we had to come up with a way to deliver the show completely out of the mold that it was intended. I think that night we ended up doing a kind of an unplugged thing where we had to just forfeit all the bells and whistles, so to speak, the loops and the special, the cool sounds and the little things that just make it a bit more tip top,
Yeah.
So, I guess what I'm just trying to say is that over the years, I've learned that you expect to get what you asked for, but you also kind of in the back of your mind, that it might not happen. And then you just, like you say, with the client watching or whatever, you just have to deliver. You have to come forward and do your best, even though in the back of your mind, you're going like, oh, this doesn't sound like I know it can sound. But you have to sort of grin and bear and let bamboozle the audience, so to speak, in a way that they can still, because they don't know what's gone on before the time, or what's going on behind the scenes, that we're all struggling with, whatever it might be. They've come there for a good time and to be wowed by the music that they've come to hear, or to have a good time, to dance or whatever it might be, So it is a real challenge, but it's something that I feel as I've matured over the years and gone on through my process, I've found I've learned to deal with it better and not to get too flustered, and just trying to find a way to deal with each step of the process the best I can. Like each song is a new hurdle. This one we'll get through, because it's not going to matter whether it's an electric piano sound or whatever sound. It's not going to make a difference to the end of the gig. It's just my preference of what we had planned, that kind of thing.
So let's bring it back to the people side of things. And I mean, the rider side is important, and I think I just want to comment on that. It came up quite a bit last night or 2 nights ago in the discussion with Simon, where in South Africa a lot of riders don't get taken seriously, and that's the perspective that you perceive, because companies that get festivals or get events, obviously your profit margin goes up when you can use your gear. And if you've bought, I don't want to own Backline. I've got a relationship with SA Backline, and that works for me because he's got everything on the planet, and I can service my clients properly that way. But if I had to start buying Backline, it's like a laptop. You buy it today, a keyboard, next week there's the new one out, next week there's a new one out, and someone like yourself, you don't change every 2 weeks. You're endorsed, so you do. If there's new technology that Yamaha brings out that works for you, you're going to try and work with that, But a Korg of the same price is not going to. It doesn't fit the bill, So it's important for guys to try and their utmost first prize fill the riders, and if it is not possible, and the most common reason it's not possible is not availability or resources. It's budget. If you have offered your service for something and budget is an issue, you should go into it. When we quote on gigs, we try and get as much information as possible. We won't. I don't give prices over the phone. We try and get as much information, and when we do give the client a quote, that's the price. If we then get information that is slightly different, we need to adapt on our side so that we can still deliver. But it's not a question of requoting or, unless it's like something that comes in as a late official request, you can add it to the bill. But if it's something that's within the sphere, you have to cover that. And at least then, if it is an actual challenge, so say we travel to Zambia, which we've done, and they don't have an XF7, then it's communication and send us pictures or PDFs or whatever you've got so we can prepare. But we're doing communication. So you actually arrive there with the knowledge of what you're going to be getting there, in that scenario, whether it be the drum kit, the bass amp, the guitar amp, keyboard, anything like that. It's communication. And I think that's the thing that people take for granted, and I've heard people say this, well, when they get you, we'll sort it out. And if you're arriving at a festival and the first thing you get is, you arrive at a festival, often if you're traveling with a band, the manager gets out, runs around. If I'm there, I get out, I go first. And it's not to go set up always, it's just to go prospect, see what's there. If it does it fill the rider, is it all there? And then, I've done this with you guys before where I've phoned and said, listen, call time is no longer 2, come at 4, because it's going to take me 2 hours to sort this out. And then it's my job to give you the facts, tell you what's there. And I know that if I sort myself out and I sort the tech out, I can accommodate you a lot quicker, even though it feels a bit rushed. But I need to put you at ease in the fact that I've got it. I've got it in hand, as opposed to pointing fingers and this. And if I throw my toys out the cot and argue with someone for half an hour because this is not what we asked for, that doesn't help.
It's just wasted time.
It's wasted time. But it's
energy.
Exactly. So communication is key. So communication in advance is probably the most powerful tool in your arsenal when you're planning events. And then because not everybody is flexible to a degree, but if it's not communicated, you can't make it their fault. I can't tell people that you're a fussy guy if you don't like my keyboard, but I never let you know that I don't have your keyboard. That kind of scenario. So it's very important to communicate these things properly. So if we bring it back to the people side, from your perspective, and this is going to be a very broad question, I'm going to just throw it at you. What makes a good sound guy? It's very generic.
Yeah. Well, obviously someone who's, in my opinion, someone who's got good ears, who can hear, like I've found over the years, there's sometimes guys that are on the front of house that they really don't know your genre that well. So they might start where you're doing a jazz gig, they might start with the kick drum, and then you can hear it's like a heavy metal kind of vibe going there. And so when I say someone's ears, I don't necessarily mean, can they hear a good tone or whatever. I mean, have they got a broad knowledge of what music should sound like, what genres of music should sound like what. So yeah, what was the question again? I'm like, huh?
Yeah, no, well, on that, just pause that thought. The question was, what makes a good sound engineer? But you mentioned something now. So I know for a fact that if you're on stage, whether you're on in-ears or wages or whatever, when the front of house mix is happening. Even if it's not facing you. You can feel it. You feed off the crowd. Where, because you've got trigger points in the songs. Especially when you know songs well, and that, like Blue Bamboo, there's certain songs that you do that you're expecting almost from any audience certain response points to bits in the music, to vocal lines, to this, to that, intros even sometimes, the first 2 bars and people go, poof, whether it be off a track or a keyboard pad or something like that. And if front of house is not happening, that doesn't happen. Or, so for example, someone does it like that. If they don't know the band, they don't have the stem line up, to the required level to give that ident to the song when it starts, or that little motif in the middle that's missing or something like that. How much of that does plague your mind throughout a gig? Is it something you sort of just put aside and just play the gig, or do you actually pay attention to that?
Yeah, I'm very aware of that. I often feel like, yes, is the mix working in the front, because I'm not feeling necessarily what it is from on stage. But it's unfair because I can't judge from that position. Sometimes you're far enough forward on a stage to really feel and hear what's coming out of the PA, obviously with limitations. But other times you're so far behind the PA, you really have I sometimes just have no perception of what's coming out. So, and then these days with in-ears, you really are cut off. I found that was more a thing with monitors, with wedges, that you could sometimes come to the front of the stage, especially like if I'm roaming on the sax, then it's nice to come to the front and kind of feel what's happening in the front there. And I actually love that. It's one thing that I miss a lot about wearing in-ears, which has become almost 90% of the shows I do at this stage in my life are on in-ears. In fact, 99%. It's very seldom that it's not an in-ear thing. So I actually miss that. And sometimes I know you guys, you do mix in a bit of, or there's enough bleed to kind of get a sense of what's coming forward. But And then obviously there's the other option where you can crack an ear open. You can take one of your in-ears slightly out and hear what's going on in the real world. But yeah, because often we spoiled with the kind of mixes you guys give us. We feel like we playing in the CD, it's like pristine mix, but out front you don't really know what's happening. But I will say that for those people that are watching that don't know, Cristo and Eddie and the guys have been since the outset of the band. Since when we put the band together, I knew that I wanted to have a sound engineer that was part of the band. I didn't want to have to rely on whoever was available at. And no disrespect to anybody, it's purely out of the sense that I feel that if you know what's coming in our songs, like by now you've mixed us enough, and Eddie's mixed us enough times to know, like, oh, this song is we need to ride this element in the track a bit more, or it's really heavy on. Brendan's going to lead vocals on this song where Nigel would normally be leading, or whatever it might be, So it's such a giant leap forward for me, knowing that I'm in good hands, just because, and to take a step back to what you were saying earlier, is when we get to a Blue Bamboo gig, 9 out of 10 times we can literally just plug in, go, the keys feel great, vocal feels great, sax, maybe up a little bit with reverb, that's perfect. I can hear everything, let's go. There's none of these long, lengthy sound checks that, in fairness, I mean, if someone else is mixing us that hasn't mixed us before, of course it's going to take time. It's no judgment.
It's not a bad thing. It's a knowledge thing. Yeah,
it's a knowledge thing, and we've been super blessed to come such a long road with you guys and have such a great relationship that's lasted through the years. That we know that it just takes so much strain out of the gig, knowing that you guys are on the gig, you're going to get there. The kit is top notch. The everything is prepped the way we like it. You know what I like. You know what Nigel likes. Everybody else in the band likes, and we can 9 out of 10 times just plug in and play, and that takes so much stress, because often after a long, lengthy sound check, you can actually be exhausted, and it can really take away from the gig, because you've been standing on stage for who knows how many hours, trying to sort of just get your head above water so that, okay, we can float, we can do this gig.
Start. No, it's true, and then, so apart from the ear thing, and I get what you're saying there, we teach at ASE as well, my brother does music appreciation, where we genre and approaching genres from a different perspective when we talk about mixing and all that, and every genre is different, and if, as a seasoned sound guy, your ability to recognize a genre and go with what is needed for the genre. I made the statement the other night, as a sound guy, I'm not necessarily a producer at all. I'm there to take whatever you guys are producing and give that to the audience in the best possible way, because you guys are already producing something. I'm just fulfilling it and making sure that the audience gets what you guys are doing. It's not my job to go, okay, how can I make this better? From a creative perspective, obviously the tone and the feel and, the balance and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, that's our job. But being in context is more important. When you're mixing front of house, your most effective tool, I'm talking slowly, thumbs up, thumbs down.
I heard thumbs up, but I can't hear you at all.
Sorry, man.
There you are.
The number you have dialed does not exist. Hello? Please call again. Yeah, there we go. What I was saying is, from a genre perspective,
I can hear you.
The a sound engineer that's in context. In other words, you're reading the audience well. Even your volume at front of house, the way that you're playing a room, what we do at Catsies and what we do at a corporate is two different contexts. You have to be able to fit what the band does into that context well, as a part of the band. Your objective when you're sitting at a corporate doing a background set is different to getting a crowd on their feet on a dance floor. It's too complete. And the sound guys got to be on the same page, so from that perspective.
Absolutely.
So talking about the sound guys still some more, besides having a good ear and all that, but what if the guy is phenomenal? He does an absolutely amazing job, but his attitude stinks. So he wants to tell you what to do the whole time, or doesn't pay attention to you.
Yeah, it's thankfully it hasn't happened that much to me over the years. Most of the guys, my perspective is I always try and treat the sound, especially if it's someone that I don't know. Like the first time someone's mixing for us, I always try and treat them with the utmost respect, because I know that if we get off on the wrong foot, then we're going to have a struggle the whole night. If he feels like I'm too, if I'm sort of asking too much too soon or whatever, I'll always give the guy a chance to get sorted and to settle into the mix and to find our working sort of pace and our synergy. Because if it's, I feel it's important to be able to communicate in the unspoken things. Like he can see that I'm struggling with my in-ears or whatever, and struggling to, then he'll be sympathetic to me and go, okay, something's up. He'll send a tech guy or that kind of thing. So it's I keep losing my train of thought. I don't know. But,
that's okay. I'll put some sheet music up for you.
That'll help.
No, look, from my perspective, I think what I'm trying to get at, and I don't want to lead your answers or push you into say something specific, but if anything, from my perspective as a company owner, as someone that's been doing this for more than 2 years, with youngsters coming in and new guys coming in, and I get a lot of CVs. I get a lot of guys asking to work for us or with us. When I travel the country and I go to festivals, you bump into other company owners and sound techs from other companies, and they're always full of questions. I don't mind sharing. I don't mind teaching. I don't mind mentoring guys. I've got a bunch of guys that I mentor outside of the staff that I've got and some students. But I think the first conversation, which is the one that people don't always want to listen to, because the youngsters and guys want to get into the industry, is all about, so how do I mix, and what gear should I buy, and how do I do this, how do I get to do that, and it's good to have inspiration. I don't want to knock that. If you're not inspired to do something, you're in the wrong field. But you have to understand what you're getting into, and I always say that I can teach anybody a skill, but I can't teach you an understanding. You need to get it. If the penny doesn't drop, if you don't get, if you've had a fight, or you sit on your cell phone next to a stage, if you're a monitor land or side of stage, and you're the closest, for example, to a musician like yourself, and you have an issue, and you look around and you see a guy, and there's a sound tech, and he was being here the whole day, he might be tired, but when you look at him, he's on his cell phone. That shouldn't happen, and it shouldn't be your job to try and get his attention. You should be, the minute you look left to try and find someone, when you look right, he's already standing next to you, because he noticed that you're looking for someone. That's the attitude that someone brings in, and those are the guys that get noticed.
Yes.
And it's you're not noticing because of his mixing skill. You're not noticing because of his technical prowess. It's a big word for Afrikaans, ook from Benoni. You're not noticing him for for anything like that. You're noticing him as a considerate, on the ball, in the moment, paying attention, taking ownership of the moment, taking ownership of his own.
Ready to serve.
Exactly, and that's where I'm leading towards, and from my perspective, the way I run my company and my guys, we're in a service industry. The more we can support you and make you the champion, the better you perform, the better it makes us look. Putting aside the fact that the technical has to happen, we have to be prepared. For example, you guys don't always see this, but when we've got you guys do a 6 o'clock sound check, for example, if we use Catsy's as an example, Catsy's in Rosebank, 6 o'clock is sound check. My rule with the guys is by 5 o'clock, they need to be doing line checks, which means, everything's pushed up, because if there's something wrong at 5, they've got an hour to sort it out. If they're working towards 6, and by 6 o'clock they find an overhead not working or a keyboard line not working, you're there already. And instead of them servicing you, helping you set up, helping you carry your stuff from the car, whatever, they're sorting out something. Now, you wouldn't necessarily mind that, but you notice hustle and a bustle, and in a small space, imagine that happening, where we limit, if you go doing some corporate venues, you can only get onto stage at a certain time and you've got that much time. So if we work to that timeline, then you see something wrong, you're watching your clock. Are we going to make it? Is everything okay? Yeah. And if you have to ask guys, are you guys okay? That means you've noticed it. That means you're aware that there's something not right. Now, they might be dealing with it, but it's distracting for you. And that's the kind of thing I don't want happening. I want you to walk in and see the guys waiting for you. And not all scenarios always allows for that, because we do have time constraints. But if you get used to a certain kind of working ethic, if you want to put it that way, then the crunch times become easier, because you know how to handle yourself. You've problem solved. You've done all these kind of things, and it's a way of. I've done it before when I don't always go and be part of the setup anymore, but I'll arrive earlier than what I said I'm going to be there to catch them off guard, and I've done it once or twice. You guys don't see that, but then I put them on the spot. I say, guys, you told me you were ready and you're not ready. What about, what are we doing there? I said, yes, but,
it's 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock. Why aren't we ready? And it's a mindset, and the importance of having a guy that's in that kind of a mindset, that when you arrive on the scene, because from a technical perspective to a creative perspective, it now becomes all about you guys, because the better we do our job, and the more we can support and not have you worry about any little bits and pieces, put your mind at ease, because you've got one or two other things to focus on, whether it be, if, I don't know, you've got a dep in the band, you've got to skip a couple of songs, you're trying to sort other stuff out, song lists, charts, key changes,
there's always something.
There's always something. And if technical is one of those somethings, it's something that's out of your control. Because someone else has to do it for you. It just adds, and it lingers. When it's stuff that's in your control, you've got it. What you can do a priority list, because, well, let me do this, and I can sort that, and then I can go talk and so and so. But if it's a technical thing, you're trying to do this, but your focus is like you're saying now, you keep losing your train of thought. In a pressure moment, we don't want the sound guys to be the problem or the cause of that.
They need to be on the other side, helping you get through all that stuff without.
Exactly, and I mean the way that you say it now, the way that you work with us, the prep that we do at Sound GP, we try and create that environment so that when you do get there and you walk up, you plug in, we're ready. We're doing stuff with you from step 1, 2, 3, 4, done. Everything's great. Carry on. You don't have to wait. You don't have to. Struggle with something or struggle to get communication to someone or anything like that. And it's all about putting your mind at ease. So the advice for young guys is, when you observe at a gig or you help at a gig, because you've seen us bring students to gigs, for example, and when you see them for the first time, they don't do much other than observe. They help load and unload. And then if you see him again, that's normally a good sign. Not because he did anything great technically, but he pitched up and his attitude worked. If you see him a third or fourth time, he might be switching on mics and changing batteries. That's already, and then if you think about other Brendan that works for us, that you've seen him come from a pre-shaved teen to a young man that he is now. He's got 2 locks. But I mean, he can do that whole setup by himself, and he's and run it off, which he's done a couple of times. But it's from being there and observing, learning how to do it, not necessarily only from a technical spec, but also from how do you treat people, how do you treat crew,
his attitude is.
How do you treat the venue?
Is amazing.
The other staff that's working in other departments, everything from waiters to other technical lighting guys, all of that. There's a lot more to this industry than just knowing how a mixer works or knowing how to push faders. If you arrive at a gig, I don't know how to equate it. Now, if you can play all the scales, it doesn't mean you can play all the songs. There's other homeworks you have to do. And as good as a musician,
even if you're a great musician, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to kill on this gig, because there's a lot of things that come alongside that, and like being on time, like coming dressed for the occasion, like being prepared, and being able to roll with whatever punches may get thrown at you. All those things that, apart from being able to blow the hell
Yeah.
out of whatever instrument or play the hell out of whatever instrument. There's a lot of other things, and just being someone that's that people want to work alongside, because you can be the best musician, but it can be difficult to work with for many reasons, and those are things that I strive to try and sort of be aware of, because we spend a lot of time around each other, and I'm talking about obviously Blue Bamboo and other bands that I work with. We try and we end up spending days on end sometimes, from morning rehearsals all the way through lunchtime, and more afternoon rehearsals and sound checks and whatever, and days, sometimes weeks on end. And you don't want to be the one that's irritating everybody because of your irks or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
as an example.
So, and then from a different perspective now, when talking about the technical side again, when you're doing sound checks, getting your sound going and all that, obviously, there's the attitude out there sometimes that certain musos are difficult. They're being unrealistic in what they're asking for, in terms of whether it be EQ, volume, reverb, whatever it is. There's tons of different things. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work with young musicians, people only first getting onto stages or in-ears, and you can train them from a tech point of view on how to approach the subject, what are the key elements that they need to work on, and then they can take it from there. And then I've worked with other people where they carry some very bad habits. For example, 1 ear in, 1 ear out. And you running 2 in-ears, you said you take one out to get a bit of feel, but you know that you can't do a sound check like that or run a show like that.
No.
And get in that right headspace from a monitoring perspective. But it's not the sound guys.
Unless you're struggling, unless you've got like a real issue and you're struggling to, then I crack one and try and sort of find what's
but it's
surviving,
not,
I guess.
Exactly. You work around, but I mean, obviously we try and avoid that from happening.
Of course, yeah.
But the last thing you need is a sound guy coming to tell you, listen, you have to take one out, or it doesn't help putting both in, or you don't need reverb in your ears.
Yeah.
Have you had that before?
No, thankfully. I mean, I've had some guys struggle to get a good reverb sound or whatever, that kind of thing, but no one's ever told me that I don't need it. They've maybe told me that they don't have it, that all the sends or the auxes are all used or whatever, but no, I've never had anybody tell me that I don't need it, thankfully.
Yeah. Look, it's a silly example, but it's about, and it's that mindset of knowing that I'm here to serve you, and the biggest stumbling block you can have from a communication perspective is perspective. Like if you and language sometimes, you're saying my mic's a bit bright, or it sounds a bit open, or there's some terminologies and stuff that happens which what you say and what I hear is two different things unless we can discuss it or talk about it. So when you work with myself, sometimes as you say something, I'm already getting in there because I understand where you're coming from. Whereas with someone else, you might say the same thing and then realize he's not understanding me. I need to rephrase, or I need to be more specific.
Yeah, the terminology is not quite.
Yeah.
And from a technical perspective, some people won't necessarily know the fact that they're talking about the high mid-range or whatever that's bothering them in a sound, and they'll say something sounds tinny, or I don't know what.
Yeah, but it's there's no right and wrong. It's perspective. If I spend a lot of time, with any musician, you start figuring out how they speak, and you can work around that. But it comes from relationship and mutual respect and listening, and observing. We got a question here. We spoke about riders earlier from Z. He's asking what is the one item what is the one non-negotiable item on your rider?
For me?
Yeah.
Or for you?
No, you go first.
No, I don't think I have a non-negotiable. I mean, I suppose it all depends on the gig, Like if it's a Blue Bamboo gig, we write. It's a pop outfit, so we rely heavily on. Well, I wouldn't say pop, but it's a party band essentially. So we rely heavily on tracks to supplement what we're doing on stage. So if we get there and we don't have our however many lines it is that we send from our tracks player, because we've got individual outputs for different elements. So like all our perk stuff will come out of a specific line, and our additional keys elements will come out of a stereo pair, etc., etc. If they come and tell us, oh, they've only got 2 lines for the tracks player or something, then that makes a big difference for me,
Yeah,
like,
and has a big outcome on the result.
Exactly.
I think from a technical perspective, the one thing that has come up the most when I get phoned when people receive the Blue Bamboo rider, I sat with Wendy, the agent, and we pulled up the rider. We kept trying to keep it as realistic as possible. It's not all about glitz and glamour and want to get all the best and the best of the best, but there's stuff on there that we need to be able to perform. And the most common question is, do they really need ears? Can we not do can we not do monitors? There's already monitors on stage. Can they not just use the monitors? And I have exactly the same response. I sort of laugh, but then you can't laugh because again, their perspectives. You got to explain tracks, click,
why,
why it's important, communication, because we put a talkback mic up with you as well, so you can talk to the guys on song changes. So it's not about. There are some technical non-negotiables. Obviously the core band structure and all that has to be able to be accommodated. In-ears is actually a non-negotiable at the moment. Especially for key members like yourself, drums.
Yeah, I think we'd still survive relatively well if it was down to like two or three sets as opposed to the whole band. I mean, I would definitely need to be on them, but. If push really came to shove, I think we could still probably pull the gig off without it. But it's cutting it fine, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but it's also and again, that's what when I said in the beginning of the conversation, the way if as a band you get booked to perform based on your previous gigs and what people have seen you do and your reputation, and to be able to pull that off effectively, you have to have the technical support. You say you can make it work without, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same impact. You're a little bit distracted.
Trying to do it with one hand behind your back, so to speak. It's like
so it's important for people to understand that and respect that. There's a question here from Kyle. From a freelancer side, when the permanent crew says it's fine, when it really is not, how does one get around that without causing a problem? I think that's probably more a question on my side. Look, every company has got different protocols to work to. I always tell students, if you go work for Soundcorp or Sound Stylist or Sound GP or Gearhouse or wherever, there's a lot of terminology differences. The way we speak about power, signal, microphone stands, DIs, all different things. Some people call them on the technical names, other people call them generic names. So get to understand the terminology and how a crew works. If your standard is high, if you've got a good relationship with the guys, you could probably speak to them. But in the moment, if you're working with for someone, you have to obviously abide by their rules. I always say to the staff, you can't get in trouble for doing what you're told to do. If you do what you're told to do and it's wrong, the person who told you is the one in trouble. But there's a but to this, because if you're the one in front of the thing that's being affected, you're the first one in the firing line, so it's a difficult challenge, and I understand that. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that question. I think it's building, if it's something that is not going to have a negative outcome immediately, if it might not just be at your level of expectation, I would say carry on the conversation afterwards and try and build a relationship and try and see if you can influence in a positive way a little bit. Because at the end of the day, if you are a freelancer, you want to keep working. So, it's the ball's in your court from that perspective. But if it's something that's going to affect the situation, I think the problem will get solved in itself, because it'll be a negative one, and it'll have to get solved in that moment. It's a weird question to answer, because it's more of a discussion in a situation.
Yeah, there's no right.
Yeah. So that's the last question I can see there for now. So then I want to come back to just some experiences you've had. If you travel the world, there's also a lot of discussions where, where's South Africa at? Where's our industry at? You know, if we go to the States, everything will be a lot better. You know, if you go to Europe, you know, they really know what they're doing. You don't have the same problems. You don't have the same challenges there. What would be your answer to that? I mean, you've gone to a couple of different countries, you know, with the same band, for example. And what has been your experience what have you observed from a technical perspective? That's maybe different or otherwise.
What I'd say is that, especially in the last 10, 15 years, South Africa's come like crazily along. You know, we don't have to step aside for anybody in terms of what you're asking, the technical aspect of what we've got on our what you guys can deliver. We've been lucky. If I think about the international gigs that I've done, I've had some really sketchy ones. I'm not thinking about any specific act now. I'm just saying over the years there've been a few that have been way worse than anything I've ever had at home, as in here in South Africa. And then obviously there's been fantastic ones as well, where we've been lucky enough to tour with our own crew in the States as well. So similar kind of thing to what we've had, and in Europe, similar kind of thing to what we've had with Sound GP, in that we arrive with the bare bones of what we need. Like we travel maybe with a keyboard and the specifics that we need to make the show grind along, and then the rest is supplied. But the bottom line is that the crew that we've traveled with, we've always been very lucky in that they would, like on the first show or two, they'd have a look at, oh, Brendan likes his keyboards this far from each other in terms of the two keyboards on two tiers, and he likes the tracks player there, and he likes the sax, the sax mic ready to be waiting over there. They pick up all those things really quickly, and by the time you hit the third or fourth show, you literally walk on stage and take out my sax and plug in a few little bits and pieces, maybe my memory stick or whatever, and we're good to go. So, but it's not necessarily any better or different to what you guys do for us as well. Knowing, having traveled, have gone through that journey together, as opposed to coming on a fresh stage with a fresh crew and I think wherever you go in the world, there's great guys and there's not such great guys wherever you go. But I wouldn't say that we have to step aside for anybody. In fact, they could learn a few things from some of our guys, definitely.
Well, it's nice to hear. I mean, because I've traveled as well, and I've faced similar challenges that I face locally. If I travel to one of the provinces here with an artist, and I travel to another country with an artist, it's very similar. I mean, people are people, attitudes are attitudes, gear is gear.
Yeah.
We got some great gear, and it comes down to the same elements all the time. And an attitude can make or break a gig wherever you are in the world. And I think that's
absolutely
that's the crux of it. And I think
the personality behind the people is huge. It's a massive part of it, because even if the gear is not fantastic, if someone's willing to bend over backwards and make you comfortable and do whatever it takes to sort of get you to at least a point that you can deliver, it makes all the difference. Like, even if you're like, if I think back to the gig we did in Zimbabwe for New Year's, Eddie was thrown in the deep end there with gear like from hell, and it was a grueling afternoon. We had a tough time getting set up and getting comfortable, which we never really got comfortable. But Eddie did everything in his power, and he sweated blood and tears that day.
I know.
to work around what they supplied, because they just ignored the rider,
Yeah.
Well, they didn't ignore it, but they said that they had certain things and then certain things weren't. And Eddie, I know, I questioned him on the days leading up to the gig, saying, have you spoken to them? Do they have this keyboard? Do they have these mics? Do they have? And he said, yes, they've sent the rider a few times and they've been on the phone and they've confirmed. Yet when we get there,
yeah, I mean, we had a gig like that. I don't know if you remember that one at that conference center in Zambia. It was that wedding where I literally sent a message.
Yeah.
I left you guys at the hotel. I actually ended up doing a complete reset up and a line check and a sound check. Ears checks, everything by myself. You guys came, got on stage and performed we actually didn't even do a sound check. And
Sound check,
front of
yeah.
house was on the stage next to Neil's drum kit. You know, it was that bad. And then, you know, it was... No, you weren't on that one. That's why the track player was with Neil Ettridge on drums. You weren't there. I think it was Chris Luke that was with us. And I literally did the sound check for every single individual, every musician. And they arrived there. There was a curtain divide between the dance area and the ceremony, so we couldn't make noise. The band got there, quietly got on stage, got ready,
you guys
and then
telling me about this
curtain open, first song. You know, that's literally what we went into. But I would never have been able to do that if I didn't obviously know everybody and, you know, had the relationship with everybody. And it wasn't perfect, but it was something we could start with.
Absolutely.
It was fun. There's a good question here from Revel.
Hey, Rev.
Brendan, do you prefer having a personal mixer on gigs or a competent monitor guy, and in brackets he puts he doesn't qualify, who gives you a full mix? or is it show dependent?
You know, sure, I can't say I prefer one or the other, but what I will say is that the experience that I've had with like the MEs and stuff, the personal mixers that you guys supply, is very often when we get to the gig, it's already semi set up. It's like it's almost good to go anyway. So that mix is already like sorted from the technical perspective. You guys have already got it to a point that it's kind of just a tweak for us, as opposed to you know, it's not like we have to have mega skills to get a great mix in our ears. It's close. It's just a question, I prefer the hi-hat a little loud, or whatever it might be, you know, and maybe pan a few things around. So it's really a luxurious position to have. I mean, you've got this beautiful in-ears, and you can create this amazing spacious mix where sometimes, you know, with I mean, to get back to the question, I digress. It's I don't have a preference. I like both. If it's a good guy on wedges or on ears, and they can get us a great mix, I'm 100% happy.
Like you said, you can have that point of reference. You know, when you get there and it's a monitor guy that knows you well, and he hands you an in-ear pack, and you get on there, you're pretty much at a similar point where it's just minor tweaks. You know, because you've got that relationship and understanding, and you know, having an ME in certain scenarios work, in certain scenarios don't. You know, it does. You know, festivals, I found, you know, it can become a problem because not everybody's familiar with the technology, and the time it takes. You get on stage, you've got your saxophone, all your bits, and then you still have to do this. You know, it's another element. So there it helps having a decent monitor guy that knows what he's doing. Maybe not Revel,
I'll
like
agree with
says,
that.
but
it definitely goes about the time. You know, like if I think about some of the big gigs we do, like Afrikaans Groot, for example, there you've got a couple of days of setup. You know, it's not like you walk in and you have to, and it's going to happen now. So by the time we hit show one, for me at least, and I think I speak for a lot of the guys, the mix is so sorted that you don't even think about your ME on stage mixer. In my case, I'll tweak it here or there because I know in this song I've got a solo that I've got to go up to the front for, and I know that when I move from this position, I might need whatever to come up a bit, or maybe a bit more of myself, just so that I can hear myself over being like right in front of the drums, for example.
Exactly.
Or step forward. You know. So it's nice to have that and not have to rely on trying to communicate that with a monitor guy, which on some of those big stages they really are positioned for the talent as opposed to the band, you know. I'm not saying that's the case with Afrikaans Groot, because they've got a separate monitor guy that looks after the band and a separate monitor guy that looks after the artists. So I'm just saying it can happen that way, you know.
Yeah. No, I think it does, and I think Revel answered his own question. It is show dependent, and it comes down to tech as well. I mean, you know how the instruments work. You know, it's not something you can throw at. You know, I've seen some drummers, when you put a little 4-channel mixer next to them, they still call you because they don't know how to work that. You know.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of education as well. I mean. The last thing I want to ask you, we're sitting just on an hour now. from all your years of experience, all your years of performing, all of that. I'm getting another question, so my train of thought's going just like yours. Z's asking a technical question about in-ear monitoring. How many drivers is ideal? Does it even matter? Obviously, it does matter in terms of what you're trying to get out of them in genre. You know, if you're looking at real R&B type stuff with heavy low end, or if you're a vocalist, you don't need a 7-way driver to get that real low end going. And it's a cost thing as well. But if you buy the cheapest, if anything, if you're using in-ears that are made for in-ears, in other words, from a music perspective, you're already on a better foot than using like what Brendan's got on now, which is made for communication in this regard. Those are the worst things you can put in your ears on a stage, because they are designed around processed, packaged music on cell phones, iTunes, all that, with a very set dynamic range. We're gonna have episode 2 of our loudness thing next week. We'll get into the technical of this, but very set dynamic range and processed music. On a live stage, the one thing you don't have is controlled dynamic range. So those earphones, the cheap, what we call bud earphones, can't handle that dynamic. So you do a 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 sound check, and when everything drops in, you can't hear anything. It's just a mess. So if you get, whether it be Sennheiser, Shure, AKG, there's a couple of really good brands that have got affordable starting level in-ears. As long as it's made for the live stage, you're already on a better foot. And then from there on, it's a costing thing. And don't be afraid to try stuff. Don't buy on other people's recommendation if you haven't had an opportunity to listen. Everybody's ears are different. What you like and what other people like is different things. So just pay attention to that. And most of the manufacturers have got samples that you can try and you can use. And I think if you've traveled enough, you've used enough generics also to know what works for your artist. Selby's asking, have you ever had to not want to do a gig because the gear was not what you requested or just not up to scratch? Have I not?
I can actually.
Yeah.
I'll step in there for a second. I've actually gotten to a gig or two where that's kind of happened, and I've gone like, oh, I'm dreading this gig because the sound check was a nightmare, And funny enough, sometimes that can totally swing around, and you can have the best gigs off the back of that, because your expectation wasn't there, So you end up, you just throw caution to the wind and you go for it, and that it's not going to be perfect, but you still have to deliver. And so to answer the question, yes, I've been in that position on a handful of times where I've really sort of been looking up to the gig, so not looking forward to it, like dreading it, and then it turns out to be. I turn out to be wrong, and it turns out to be great, even though it's maybe challenging on the ears, but it's still a great gig.
Yeah, I've had a couple of gigs where you get up there and you sort of, I'm always early. Some of the artists that I travel with get irritated because I want to be at the venue so early sometimes. But I make a point of walking around and check out everything. First of all, I get to know the crew, I see who's where, and I walk around, I see what the gear is, and sometimes I've gotten to some points and I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be a challenge, because the gear is really substandard. They've got 5,000 people on the field, and they've got a PA that's suited for 500 people, and the thing's in the red already, and that your band or your artist is going to completely draw a different response from the crowd. And I've had situations where I've gone up to the artist and I say, listen, we're going to enjoy this one, but for a completely different reason. It's going to be a challenge, or we're going to do it.
We're going to remember this one.
Yeah. And then I remember I traveled to with Thatch Music with who was the artist? Not Cabello. Yeah, it was Cabello. I traveled to Cabello to with Thatch Music to Botswana for a New Year's Eve party. So we traveled the whole of the 31st. We didn't go to the venue because their party started at like midday already, so there was no sound checks or anything. We had a 4-piece band with Jay Dean. It was Legan on drums. I can't remember who was on bass now on that one. And it was a very interesting one. They're all on ears from front of house, because because there was no monitor console. So we got to the venue. We had a 5-minute turnaround, ran to front of house. There was an analog console with minimal sends to front of our, to stage. So JD had a little rack mount mixer, which he sent in-ears to the other band members. So the band, basically, all they needed was a vocal feed, and they could send them to themselves, and they had their tracks. So they were pretty sorted. Front of house, there was an analog desk and no outboard. So no compressors, nothing, no effects units, nothing. A crowd of about 10, 15,000 people that's been going. And maybe 20 bars into our first song, 90% of the PA died. Like dead. And I had one box on the left that stayed on. And the funniest thing is I'm standing there, and as it happens, the company owner is next to me. And it goes, and he looks at me and goes, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "You're kidding me, right?" He's like, he said, "Can you fix it?" I said, "No, can you fix it? Get there, run." So I pulled the whole band out. I put Cabello's, because the drum kit was acoustic. So I put his vocal through that one speaker. And for 3 songs, the whole crowd only had his vocal. But he carried it. The monitors were pumping. The band's enjoying having the time of their life. And then I heard some PA coming back in, and they were fixing stuff. And all of a sudden I had PA. So I slowly moved the band back in, and we played about an hour set. And I got off that one and was like, sure. Went backstage, chatted to the guys. I'm like, that was horrible. And I was like, and they're like, "Man, we loved it. It was an amazing gig." And I'm like,
no idea.
Do you know what happened? They had no clue. So I told them, and they're like, their eyes are like this. And I'm like, "Oh my word, how did you make it work?" I'm like, "Well, we made it work, And in that case, the audience being in the state that they were, and hyped up on the celebrity on stage sort of helped us. And, we made it work. But yeah, it wouldn't be a gig that I would do on purpose like that. So yeah, I think we've got to look. Everyone's got a couple of stories.
I'm trying to piece together what you're saying. I'm dropping out a lot, so I'm trying to piece together what you were saying, but I think I got it. There wasn't a question in there, was there?
Yeah. No, there was no question. I was just making statements.
Yeah.
I think I haven't seen another question come in. I think I've enjoyed chatting with you. I don't know if you've got any closing comments or any like parting gift you want to give us from your vast knowledge of wisdom.
Gee whiz, man. I think just a shout out to the youngsters that are coming into the industry. It's a tough industry, I think. And I'm talking from your perspective, from the sound engineering and the technical side of things. We obviously on stage, and you guys are there to make us look good, but you guys, from my perspective, I'd like to say thanks to you guys. I mean, we show up just before at sound check, and then we disappear, and we come back on stage, and we have a jaw, and we do our thing, and we do the best. But you guys are the unsung heroes, man. You make us look good, and you make us sound good, and long after we've gone home and we're in bed or we're having a drink somewhere, you guys are still very often slogging it out, and I really appreciate I have a good insight into what goes into what you guys do for us. So thanks for that, man, and thanks to you specifically, Cristo and Eddie and the guys from SoundGP for the support you give me and our guys. We really appreciate having strong guys like you in the industry that get it and that are so supportive.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate your encouragement, and I think I appreciate what you're saying to the young guys wanting to get into it as well. I said it last night. Someone that's 19 years old that's saying, like, how can I get this good? I need some experience, because by the time he's 20, he wants to have done it. It's like, no, this takes years, that's how it happens. I mean, people obviously, sorry, man. People sometimes, they say, what can you ask, or what would you teach your younger self? I don't know if that's the last question I'm going to ask you, 20 years ago, Brendan Ross, what would you teach him, or what would you want to say to him in this industry? I don't know if you heard that question.
Yeah, I heard 20 years ago. That's all I could hear. I'm sorry, man. The line is.
No, sorry.
I heard 20 years ago. That's what I heard.
Can you hear me now? Testing 1 2.
Yes, kind of. Yes, I can hear you. Kind of. I can hear.
What would you tell yourself if you could speak to your 20-year younger self?
what would I tell myself? With a technical aspect in mind, I think it would be to learn in any aspect of the music industry, because it all helps. I've seen some guys do what I do, but really can't help themselves on a technical aspect at all when they find themselves in deep water. And I'm not saying I have loads and loads of knowledge, but I have some knowledge because I've gotten my hands dirty. I experiment. I mix music myself, and I produce music myself, and I dabble with all things technical and when it comes to music, and I enjoy it, and I'm always trying to learn and figure out and so I guess what I would tell myself is the one thing that I am sorry about is that I never studied as such. I would love to have attended a proper music school like Berkeley or something, and just gained more knowledge. I mean, as a musician, I would like to have had more arranging skills and stuff like that, which I've learned over the years and I've picked up. But I could have been a lot further down the road, I feel, at this point in my life, had I been to a school and really zoomed in and focused on all those kind of things. Where what you're doing with your school, presenting to all the youngsters that are coming in, it's fantastic, and they're learning from guys that are at the top of their game and that are busy with it like day in and day out. So and some of them that are lucky enough to actually come in and be on your gigs and sort of come up through the ranks, like Brendan, for example, that you mentioned earlier. It's an amazing thing. So yeah, I mean, just to expand on that slightly, was that there've been times where I've actually thought I wouldn't have minded going into the technical side, the sound engineering side of things, had it not worked out for me to be on stage and performing. I still feel that attraction to sound and to mixing and that kind of thing. So maybe in another life I would have been sitting alongside you there.
Yeah. Well, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I'm glad you're on that side and on the stage, because you're an amazing musician. And I couldn't imagine you having studied, because then you would just put everybody else even more to shame than what you are currently. There's very few people that can pull off performances like you can. I mean, I appreciate you every time you're on stage. And it's for me, I walk away from gigs where I've seen you guys play, and it's just, if no one else was there, I had an absolute ball, and I was really entertained. I don't always look it. I know my face goes like really bland when I'm thinking and when I'm concentrating. I even have people sometimes, at events like, smile. I'm like, what? Because I'm just like completely dead face. But I'm actually really enjoying it. You can tell it when you see the
thanks.
The goosebumps on my arms.
Yeah, man.
But thank you. I mean, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing some knowledge with us and some insights. And I think the theme that's carried through from a communication, respect, attitude, all of that is very similar to what we've been speaking about, and it's nice hearing the appreciation from your side for that, and it's not just a good to know or a good suggestion. It's a reality, It's
a reality, yeah.
Any youngster that comes in, developing your technical side alongside your social and your attitude, your technical will actually take its own route if you focus on developing yourself and your attitude in a situation, because then you will get the opportunities. There's nothing worse. And I've had situations where I've got a guy coming in and I can see he's got immense talent. He knows his stuff. He's so but he's such a hard load on a crew, because he's always moaning, or he's just high maintenance, that makes sense, or he's just not a team player. And you think, and I've taken one or two of those guys aside sometimes, and I've spoken to them once or twice. It's worked, other times it hasn't, and I'm not being mean. I'm just like, if I can give you some advice, you've got huge potential, just drop the attitude, or and I don't say it in that perspective, in that way. I try and bring perspective to it so they get where I'm coming from, because it'll do you a lot of good to be a team player and understand what impact your personality has on a crew and on a team. You know, and then like you said, when you pick a band or you pick a dep or you pick someone to represent you, it's very crucial that they fit. You know, and me as a company owner, you know, I'm just going to let anybody in the door if they don't fit with the crew, because I'm not just doing myself a disservice, I'm doing my crew a disservice because I'm putting them on the spot.
Yeah.
So it's very important. So I thought that'll be my last.
I'll add there,
yeah.
It's just that, you know, sometimes I've seen it over the years where a muso will get on stage and things are not going their way in terms of what they're getting in their ears or the monitor or whatever it might be on stage, and they can tend to maybe it's the front, maybe it's the front singer, or maybe it's the drummer, or whatever it might be, and then they have like a bit of a thing with the engineer, and they start having, you know, voices get raised and attitudes start flying around, and for me, that's like a last resort. It's actually not even an option, because it's so counterintuitive. You know, like, I need you to make me comfortable and to get me through this gig, because I'm vulnerable. You could actually, if you really have it in for me, you could take whatever you want out of my ears. Not that, you know, you would necessarily, or you know, but I'm just saying,
put a bit of delay on the click track, you know.
Exactly. Or just take the click track out. We need to work together and find like, sometimes maybe the personalities just are not a match, but we still have to get through this thing. So there's no point in hammering on at each other if we're not comfortable or whatever. I know that or whoever's behind the desk is not there to make my life difficult. Their mission is obviously to try and make it as good as possible for me, so that I can do my thing. And I know that if I'm not going to be courteous and you know, patient and all those things, and if I'm going to freak out or whatever, nothing good is going to come from that. So sometimes it's best to just, like, okay, you realize inside, this is as good as it's going to get, and deal with it, and we'll come out the other side, and it's just music. We'll live.
It's just music. Yeah, it's just a lovely. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you from my side. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the wisdom and the insights. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope everybody else enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for asking me, Cristo.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm going to check out some of the comments and try and respond to you guys, and I'm sure Brendan can do the same thing. Please check out Brendan's YouTube channel. He's doing some great stuff on there. I watched a couple of them this afternoon again. Subscribe to his channel. Check out Blue Bamboo on our Facebook page as well. Johan will drop those into the timeline. And then, keep tuning in. We'll have some more good discussions. And thank you from my side.
Awesome. Thanks from my side, Cristo.
Awesome. Thanks, man.